Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us on MindScape Exchange today, where we explore the spectrum of minds and we bridge the understanding of neurodiversity. Today, we're diving into the transformative power of neurodiversity and tech leadership with Vance Checketts, the dynamic CEO driving innovation at Auticon, a seasoned advocate for inclusivity and a visionary in the tech industry. Vance champions the integration of autistic talent into the high-impact roles. Join us as we uncover Vance's journey to CEO, explore Audicon's groundbreaking approach, and gain invaluable insights into fostering understanding, excellence, and neurodiverse workplaces. Thank you, Vance, for joining us today.
Oh, it's my pleasure. I'm happy to be here, Megan.
Perfect. So I've actually spoke to Vance ahead of time and we had a really amazing talk about his journey, becoming the CEO of Auticon. And I just would really love, for our listeners to be able to hear that journey as well.
Yeah, I'll do my best to tell you the journey. I don't know when it started. Actually, it feels like it started a really long time ago, but a couple of key moments for me. First of all was just recognizing some of the unique characteristics of my own kids. I didn't have language for it. I didn't really have, data to support it or understand it. But I went happily, into my career in tech and worked with a lot of really fascinating people who had some similar characteristics or different things, and I could kind of recognize there were different, at the time I wouldn't have called it neurotypes, right? But now I would say, yeah, different neurotypes that I was encountering and kind of recognizing without real language for it. And I always had this passion for being involved in the community and trying to have an impact. And so I would do things with Junior Achievement. I still do. In Utah, we've got a group called the Women Tech Center, and there's a private-public partnership with our state government called the STEM Action Center here. And these are things where I get into the community, and these organizations get into the community. I help people that with different learning styles get exposure to careers and technology and things like that. And then I met someone named Eric Olafson, and I've talked about him publicly. He is a fairly public person, and he was on the board of a company that I was working at, and we had a chance to work really closely together. And he started telling me about his autistic grandchild, and was very open about it and much more educated than I was about autism and other neurodivergent characteristics. And he introduced me in 2019 to the global CEO of Auticon. And I had no idea what Auticon was or who they were, but in 2019, that was a meeting Eric just prior to that, and then meeting Kurt from Auticon started my journey to actually end up where I am today. And so there were several things that happened in between. Eric joined the global board of Auticon shortly after those meetings. It was on my radar. Eric continued to tell me about his journey. I started to recognize some of these neurotypes in my own family, including in my own grandkids and one in particular. And I just recognized that I had a real passion for doing more, having more impact than I was just creating tech, which was super rewarding and super exciting. But I wanted to do something that would have impact on people in a much more personal way. And so I joined Auticon, and I'm sure I'll be able to tell you a little bit more about what Auticon does, but that was sort of the journey. All these different tech experiences and then people experiences and personal experiences just kind of led me to this happy, fortuitous introduction to Kurt, the global CEO of Auticon, and here I am now, the US CEO for Auticon.
I love it. So how has Auticon, since you've started, how has it changed your life?
Oh, it's so much a part of my life. I see people differently now than I did before. it's something that my family, they've always wanted to understand my job, right? So I've got, kids, and I'm married, and grandkids, like I said, and everybody's always, understood, at least at a surface level, what I did, what the technology was, and different companies that I've been at. You work for a company like Dell, of course, everybody's like, oh, Dell, you make computers. I'm like, yeah, that's right, we make computers. And there's a whole lot more to Dell than just, laptops and computer monitors and things like that. But for the first time, people have really been able to personally connect to what I'm doing at Auticon, to what we're doing at Auticon, because we're talking about something that we all have in common. It's the brain, and all of our brains are different, right? And so when I have these conversations, everybody just connects to it in a very personal way, and oftentimes they disclose immediately, right, their neurodivergent condition, or they talk about their friend or their family member, who's disclosed something, and it seems like everybody without a doubt connects at a much deeper level than when I said, oh, I work at Dell, and they kind of connect to a laptop.
I love it. So talk to us a little bit about what Auticon does exactly.
Okay, there's a couple of layers, and since you're a sophisticated host, and I think a lot of your listeners are educated maybe even more than I was, I'm going to give you a more detailed answer than I would just give kind of bumping into someone in an elevator, because but I'll start with that, right? If I just bumped into someone in an elevator and they said, oh, who do you work for? Auticon. Well, what does Auticon do? I'd say, well, Auticon is the ideal partner for a journey to neuro-inclusion. What does that mean? What it means is that we want to help you tap into the neurodiversity inside your work group, your company. And one of the ways that we do that is by bringing neurodiverse talent, technical talent, into your company or your organization. Oh, P.S., they're autistic. So we're going to come in with a team of autistic technologists and help you get technical work done, and in the process, catalyze this conversation around neurodiversity and help you on a journey. So, and even that might be too long for an elevator ride. I guess it depends on how many floors we're on. But I might just say we're tech consulting with a twist. The twist being autism. But the mission of the organization is to dramatically reduce the number of unemployed, underemployed, autistic adults, and also help the autistic and neurodivergent adults that are currently in the workforce and don't feel completely satisfied, supported, or as productive as they might be with some additional assistance.
I love it. So do you guys work solely with like tech talent, engineers, product managers? Who do you work with?
Yeah, so most of the jobs that we place, and the way our business model is, first we'd like to come into an organization and do an assessment, and we'd say, let us come in, we'll do some surveys, we'll conduct some interviews, we'll gather some artifacts inside your organization, and we will analyze all of that information and bring it back to you with some insights and results. And lots of companies have an ERG, an employee resource group, that's focused on different abilities, or maybe even neurodiversity specifically. That's something that we'd say, like, good job, that's a really great thing to do, and here's a couple of other things that you could do, right? And so the first thing that we would do is we would say, let's do an assessment. Training and education is oftentimes a second thing or a third thing that we would do, and then bringing in our technical talent is one other important way, like I said earlier, to kind of catalyze this conversation, because we know 15 to 20% of existing work groups. You get inside a company that's large enough with a few hundred people. I can tell you 15 to 20% of the people are neurodivergent.
Mm-hmm.
And they just may not even know it themselves, or they haven't disclosed it, or maybe they have. And so what we want to do is we want to kind of immediately, and it's not about disclosure. I don't want anyone to think that Vance is saying, oh, you need to disclose. You don't need to disclose anything other than what works for you, how your brain works. I don't need to tell you that I'm autistic or I'm dyslexic or I'm anything else. I just need to tell you that it's really hard for me to process information when it's presented like this, and so I prefer information that is presented like this. And that might include visual stimulus and all those sorts of things. So when we roll in with a team of technologists that we know that we work, they're our employees, right? And we're bringing them in as contractors. Usually, we can also do direct placement. But we roll in and we say, hey, here's your autistic tech team.
Okay.
And let me introduce you to them, right? You have, so-and-so, and here's the things you should know about their brain and the way they like to process information. Here's another person, they process information slightly differently, and here's a few other things, including a few personal tidbits. This is their favorite sports team, and you can ask them any statistic in the last 10 years, and they will tell you everything, about their team. And here's another person, and it's like we're disclosing, but not disclosing in this kind of awkward way, because by definition, our team is autistic. We're, if you look at the population of Auticon, we are the world's largest autistic majority company. Over 80% of everyone in our company is autistic. Plus, add dyslexia, ADHD, dyspraxia, all these other neurotypes. So we come in and it's sort of like we don't have to disclose. We've already disclosed just because we're here at Auticon. That just does something for people, right? When you come in and you could call it just extreme vulnerability, right? To say, hey, I'm neurodivergent, right? And here are my, this is my neurotype, right? These are the characteristics of my brain. That's a powerful way to start a conversation, and it's sort of like we do that, we model that, and it gives permission to other people. So doing that as part of a journey to neuro-inclusion is extremely powerful, and the 15 to 20% of people inside an organization are usually like, thank you for saying those words, and thank you for talking about those supports. I want those too.
Yeah. I have so many good questions from that. So that's that was really powerful. So I'm curious on what type of companies are looking for this service. How do you interact with them? Are you going out and talking to them? Are they coming to you? Are there certain sizes? Why are they looking for this type of inclusion?
Yeah, and I realized I didn't even fully answer your question about the types of roles too, but most of the roles are tech-related roles, because we want people that can get placed into roles that are high-paying, that match their skills and their abilities. And so software engineering, testing, data, oh my gosh, data management, data analysis. I mean, these are areas that our team does extremely well. Cybersecurity, AI, just to name a few. And in terms of sizes of companies, just listening to me kind of rattle off those roles, like any company, once you get beyond maybe 100 or 200 people, is going to have someone in IT, is going to have someone managing data, and even if it's like a doctor's office or a large legal firm. So typically, we're working in even larger organizations, many hundreds, or even to the thousands and tens of thousands because they all have massive IT departments. Nationwide Insurance, for example, is one of our customers, right? I don't know if you'd call them financial services, but they have a massive IT organization. So Salesforce, you would say, oh, they are a tech company, and we work with them too, and it's not just IT, but it can also be inside their engineering organization as well. So across industries, sizes of companies tending a little bit more to the medium to large sizes of companies. And of course, since I'm the US CEO, we're focused very much on the US here, but we have a global presence in across 15 countries around the globe, a lot in Europe.
Perfect. I love that. What are like some of the pushback? So, do you guys reach out to them or do they reach out to you, or is it kind of like a combination of both?
Yeah, it's an interesting question, Megan. I talk with our team because we want to be even bigger, right?
Right.
And it's kind of exciting and cool to say we're the world's largest autistic majority company. We only have about 600 people.
Oh, wow.
So, so that's not that massive, right? So we would like to be even bigger. And because we know the population of autistic people is massive, right? Millions and millions of people, and not all of them are perfectly suited for tech jobs, but a lot of them are. And so I talked with the team about, do we have a supply problem or a demand problem? Is there not enough autistic supply? Which I kind of just answered that question. Of course, there's plenty of autistic people with the skills to do the job functions I mentioned earlier. Oh, so it's a demand problem. Like we don't have enough companies and organizations willing to employ our autistic technologists or to directly hire them. And I think the answer is it's both, because even though there's plenty of autistic people, they don't always have the skills or the experience, or they're in the right location or time zone to match the demand. I have several companies that I'm talking to right now, and they say, oh, if you have somebody who knows these 3 technologies, and can be in the office 1 or 2 days a week, and all of a sudden that talent pool, that supply pool just went from the millions of people down to like this really small. So I say to our team, we have both a supply problem and a demand problem. We need more training for more autistic people and more job experiences and internships that give them the work experience to then qualify for the jobs that are available. So we're trying to both increase the supply and the demand. So the supply is a little bit easier, I think, because people find us. We're a pretty big name in the autism space, and so people find us and they come, the autistic community finds us, and they can apply for the openings that we have on our website or just submit a resume or a profile. And then we're proactively going out trying to promote ourselves to the employers and to the large organizations like I mentioned. So we have a sales and marketing team and initiatives and efforts to go out and try and promote Auticon as a partner in neuro-inclusion, a partner for neurodiverse tech talent.
So that's actually a really interesting point. So I know that, and again, I use this word really hesitantly, like in our last talk, but high functioning, right? And I say I'm using this word because I think that neurotypicals might understand this a little bit more when they're listening to it. But like myself, I didn't, 80% of women who are neurodivergent actually aren't even diagnosed by the age of 18, right? I was 35. I've had interviews with people over the last week where they're like 40, 45 before they get diagnosed, but they're all entrepreneurs. I've been in revenue development. I've been in executive level positions. And so we're there, right? But it's a matter of like, one, getting diagnosed, understanding, and that's a big part of why I even started this podcast, was to help people understand, like, this is what it looks like, and while trying to understand it myself, because masking comes into play, and masking is something that, like, I'm still trying to separate the mask. I still don't know. I couldn't go into a workplace and tell you what I needed. which is interesting. I know that the only thing that I know is that I need to work remote. Like that's where I'm most efficient, but I tend to work with a lot of data. So that, makes sense that I need large amounts of time by myself. But I don't even know if people understand that they're neurodivergent. And then like also how do they even understand like the benefits of, right, working with a company that's able to speak to it as well. So have you guys thought about like that aspect of things? And how do you manage that?
Yeah, well, I appreciate you sharing your experience, Megan, and I know this whole, series is a lot of sharing. So thank you
Yeah.
so much for doing that in your own personal journey, because you're right. So many people mask.
Yeah.
I mask in different ways too, right? Because I was conditioned, right, that I needed to be and show up a certain way, right? As a, you know, some of my labels are obvious. I'm a white middle-aged man, right? So like that just like people expect things out of me, and it's really sad, when you recognize some of those things and all these societal norms that we place on each other. And so I'm sorry you've had to mask so much, and that it's so hard to even know when the mask is on or off. One of the amazing things that happens is when we show up with this team that doesn't have a mask on, right? That has the support enablers around them, and they know what works really well for them. They know how to be the best version of their own selves and their own brains. It immediately starts, when I said like, the 15 to 20% kind of go, oh, that's awesome. It's seeing someone who has the mask off, who can articulate, this is the way my brain works. And, oh, by the way, meet my job coach, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I'll name one of our job coaches by name. Reshma is her name. She's amazing. So, here I am, and meet my job coach, Reshma. Reshma might even be the one doing the introduction of the team, right? Saying, hey, and meet Vance, and meet so-and-so and so-and-so. But Reshma is my buddy, like is my go-to person that helps me,
Mm-hmm.
Through. And I'll bet you, and poor Reshma, she's probably going to say like, everybody's hitting me up on, she posts things on LinkedIn. She's got these awesome videos about job coaching, but you could probably even watch some of Reshma's content.
I actually have. I've looked her up.
Yeah, she's amazing. And she talks a little bit about
Yeah.
supporting members of our team. And one of her colleagues, Larry, supports me. He's another one of our job coaches. And I have regular job coaching sessions with Larry. And he's got great content too. And they could probably tell you, or at least ask you some pretty probing questions and say, well, let's talk about processing information. Let's talk about written information. Let's talk about visual information. Let's talk about audio information. And they could probably just ask you a few questions and pretty quickly say, so you prefer, information presented in this format, and you prefer, and you'd probably say, well, you know what, actually, you're right. And well, let's try this, right? Let's ask, your team to make sure they do this with, information data that gets presented to you. Let's make sure that you have, no more than 2 hours of camera time. You're working remote, right? Let's just make sure that any given day only has 2 hours of camera time, and up to maybe another 2 hours of, audio time where you're not on camera, and then the rest of your time is processing time and, productivity time. Like they would do some things like that for you, or propose or suggest some of those things, and you all of a sudden, I think, say, oh my gosh, this is so much better. Mm-hmm. And some of it is just boundaries, right? But you don't even know what boundaries to set until you have someone who comes from a background and experience like Larry or Reshma, and they've just done this, hundreds of times, thousands of times, and they can quickly identify things, suggest things. We have a neuro-inclusion advisor on our team as well. Her name is Louise. One of her hashtags that I love is, actually autistic. She's like, I'm actually autistic. I love it. And so she's super open and super vulnerable and transparent too. And she'll just say, these are the things that work for me. And these are the things that don't work for me. And people who maybe have their mask on a little bit still too say, there's something there. I'm connecting to that. That sounds really good. How do I do that? And she would just say, ask, right? Or let me give you my template for this. Or let me tell you how I approached, my team for that. So it happens all the time, Megan. You are in such good company. I'm so sorry to say that there are so many people like you that know they have some neurodivergent characteristics, but don't really know how to get the support that they need, get the success enablers is another good term to use, that they need to be able to be the best version of themselves and maximize the capacity of their brains.
So I'm going to kind of just share, I think that this is a good moment to just kind of share some of my past work experience. So basically for like the last 6 years, I left in March, but I was working for a company, ran revenue, took them to 25 million plus from hundreds of thousands. And I was good at my job, but every day I was so miserable. Like I loved doing the job. It was really weird because I love numbers, I love revenue, I love what I do, and I'm customer facing too, so I'm working with all the customer facing teams. But at the end of the day, I'm so tired and I'm not even depressed. Like that's kind of what the confusing thing is. But at the end of the day, every night I would go to bed and I would have suicidal ideation is how my therapist would talk about it. And I know that this is very common in the autistic world, but it wasn't because I was depressed. It wasn't because I felt like a victim. It was because I was just so tired. Like my brain and my body was so physically tired that I just could not fathom having to get up and do it again the next day. And I understand like now that so much of that is masking. And again, I'm still trying to figure out what masking is to me and exactly what that means for myself and who I am separate from that. But these are I had to do therapy to learn like that's not a normal reaction, and like I'm like a really happy person. I love life. I love people, right? And so that for me is like, I was like, I have to leave this company because I don't know if like literally I'm going to make it. And I tried to have conversations, right? And so again, it's just like the education on neurodiversity. And if I can't ask for myself, and one too is like, there's shame around it, like just to be 100% honest, like I'm interviewing for jobs right now. Not once have I told any of them that I'm neurodivergent, right? And there's, I've talked to my friends, I've talked to my therapist, I've talked to others, and they're like, don't do it. It's a liability. It's, the disability is a liability for the companies. And I've even talked to like my friends who are CEOs, and one of them is actually autistic as well and neurodivergent. He was like, I'm not going to, build something around the 20% of people. I'm going to build something around the 80% of people, and the conversation that I've kind of sorted out for myself. And again, it always comes back to data because I'm a data nerd, but, researching through and looking at the data and the statistics and really like inclusivity, companies that have people with autism within their companies have higher revenue, have higher loyalty, have less churn, right? Like I'm extremely loyal, I'm extremely honest, right? But it's a double-edged sword as well with those things, right? And so, in your experience, like, how do you, I don't know, how do you help an employee who's going through that, right? So you're placing these companies, you're placing these people in these companies, you have to rely on them that they're going to follow the process, right? How do you manage that? And how do you manage the employees that maybe are like, I'm not getting what it is that I need out of here? And how do you have that conversation to where it's like not in shame and the company doesn't think that you're less of a person?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I just have to say, again, thank you for sharing. I'm so sorry that you were in those dark places and so happy that you're here right now, having such a positive impact on the world. And I do think it's normal and I've had to embrace the discomfort of some of my sadness and some of my loss, right? I know I lost like precious time with my own kids because I didn't really see them or understand them. And I know I did things that were harmful to them, not out of malice, right? But because of just a lack of, information. And so it's okay to go to a place that is sad and even a little bit dark and lonely. Now, suicidal ideation is too far. You don't want anyone to get that far down that path. But being able to lean into the discomfort is really, really important because it's also uncomfortable for neurotypicals, right? To bump into autism for the first time and to kind of stare it in the face in a really direct way, and sometimes it presents itself, I'm sure, I don't want to stereotype too much, but like just the direct, open and honest communication from an autistic individual can be jarring for a neurotypical person. Someone who goes to a job interview, and I can't tell you how many times I've heard this, and they say, the person interviewing them says, well, so why do you want to work at our company? And the autistic person says, because I need a job, because I need money to pay for my rent, and of course what they want is this neurotypical response, which is another form of masking, which says, oh, well, because I've researched your company and I saw that they were placed in this analysis by these industry analysts as the top best performing, and I saw your results from the last earnings forecast, and I really liked what your CEO said about blah, blah, blah. And, most of that is just BS, right? Most of that is a mask that we're putting up to just, but that's what we want, right? And we don't want this kind of harsh reality. And we're all living in the harsh reality. We're just all masking in our own ways around the things that are uncomfortable. And so what I would say to the individual that's part of the 20% of the neurodivergent workforce inside every company, and what I would say to the CEO that's just thinking about the 80% is that it's the 100% that we're talking about here because of this intersection and this interaction that is happening all the time. And if you realize that you've got 20% of your people interacting with the other 80%, and those interactions are less effective, and less productive, and there's research that says from institutions like Harvard Business Review that says the team, not the 20%, but the team, the 100% of the team is more productive when the 20% exists.
Yeah.
Like if you just said, well, let's cut out the 20%, we're going to be a better, more profitable company because we're just going to fire everybody who's neurodivergent. And you said it too, right? That would not be a recipe for more success. That would be a recipe for group thinking, homogenous ways of doing things that are not as innovative and, fast moving and productive, according to the research. So, trying to ignore that 20%. And if you're part of the 20%, you should be feeling like, that's right, I have something really important to contribute. And it is maybe a more direct, but a different way of solving this problem or approaching this particular project. And just because I don't want to be on camera, 10 hours a day, doesn't mean that I'm, not a committed person. Because I say in my interview that I just need a job to pay my bills doesn't mean I'm not going to be 110% committed to the success of the organization. Now, if you tell me, I'm going to be on the fringes because I'm neurodivergent, that's a problem. Yeah. But that's where we show up, right? And we help to normalize the conversation. We talk a lot about autism. We have this great graphic that kind of shows the human brain, and or it's like in the shape of a brain, and it has all these different neurotypes and neuro conditions plotted all over the place. Because we also know that you meet an autistic person, if they say they're autistic, they might also say, oh, and this and this and this.
Yeah.
And we're all that way, right? And so if we can change the conversation to be more about celebrating the body part that we all have in common, that is also totally unique across every single human on this planet, like it just does things for managers, leaders, and for the individuals. And so data will help solve this. Conversations with experts and people who this is what we do will help this. And then the lived experience of just embracing it, and whether you bring in our team or whether you just embrace it and say, let's create a neurodiversity ERG in our company, and let's hear directly from people that want to be part of that, whether they're neurodivergent themselves or just have friends and just have friends and family that are neurodivergent. Like, those are powerful things.
So I had the pleasure of interviewing a neuroscientist. His name's Ogi. He's a pretty big activist in the space as well. And he basically kind of revamped the thought on what autism really is in the brain. Like, he became a neuroscientist because the data was wrong. And he explained it so well. And I think that this is like a really, really big friction point with companies. And I know I've actually I've been told this, and I've said it myself, and I'll kind of speak to it in a second, but he described it so perfectly, which is, and I'm going to speak specifically to autism because he studied specifically autism, and I know you work with a high number of people with autism, if not all of them. So basically, the difference between a neurotypical and a neurodivergent is, or someone with autism, is you go into a room, you have a cup, you have a book, and you have a person, right? The neurotypical is going to go to the person because they're naturally and biologically and evolutionary going to gravitate to the herd, right? To think about that person. The autistic person is actually going to navigate to the book and the glass of water, the bookshelf, like whatever other object is there, but not the person, right? And it doesn't mean that they don't like people, right? But that's where their head goes. And it's actually like an evolutionary thing across all types of animals, even bacteria. We're supposed to be this way because you have your herd mentality, and we know now like the herd mentality are often wrong in their conclusion because they follow each other. The individual is actually usually right on their assumptions and data and things like that. And so basically it's a survival mechanism, but that's also where innovation comes, because they get charged from, like, for me, I need to constantly be feeding my brain or I actually start feeling sick, right? And that's what I had told him, that I was like, it's weird because if I play too much video games, if I'm listening to my like fantasy books, which I love, like my brain and my body physically start getting ill, and I have to sit and I just have to look at data for a long period of time. I have to watch educational videos. I have to read, articles across whatever it may be, right? And I start feeling better. And he was like, yes, it's because the neurotypical recharges by people. When they're bored, they're naturally going to gravitate to be energized by the person. Autistic people are actually going to gravitate and get energized by the mental stimulation of things usually, and sometimes they have their hyper focuses and things as well. And so it's interesting because I've always been like, and this is what I also want to clarify, I love people. Like, I'm not one of those people who are, and I think it's an often misconception of people on the autism spectrum, like, I love humanity. Everything that I do, the leader that I am, is not for myself. It's to be the best version of myself for someone else, right? And I mean, across personal, professional, I always want to give 110% in everything that I do because that's my commitment to them, and I take that very seriously. And that's not unique to me. That's like a lot of autistic people that I've met are very similar, right? But I'm not, and I've said this to my boss before previously, whenever we were, just talking about interactions, I was like, I'm not somebody who needs people. Like, I'm not somebody who needs to interact with a person on a daily basis to be okay. I'm not somebody who thrives in these group meetings where you're sitting there socializing and you're for an hour before you start doing the work, right? Like, I'm somebody who wants to jump in and I want to start doing the work. Relationship building is important, right? and there's a thought on like how do neurodivergents do that relationship building whenever they're not naturally to that, right? But I mean, I've had in my experience, like I remember I built an ER division for a company successfully, and he would always kind of tease me about, yes, you can now go back into your cave in the dark and be by yourself, and I'm like, and I didn't quite understand what that meant, but like it was maybe kind of thought of as like a negative thing, right? Because I'm not like this social person, but I was really, really good at what I did. And so I think that that's like, I know that that's a really common friction point. Like there's a connection that's lacking there, even in interviews, right? Like there's that connection that's lacking, and really wanting to know more about that person, I guess, or, the people as a whole within the company versus the job. And so I guess my question is like, how do you navigate that type of thing? Like the connection with the company, the fact that we're individual contributors, but like we're so good at what it is that we do, and our neurodiversity is what makes us really good at what we do.
Well, first of all, I have to say, Megan, for somebody who's still figuring out the mask, like you just said several things about yourself that are so insightful and so powerful. So you know more about how you work best and how you think and what your brain needs and what your body needs, what your heart needs, than a lot of people. So you may still be unmasking, but you're setting an amazing example. You used a term that I really like called hyperfocus, and it's a much better term than saying go to your cave.
Right.
And I used to say, I said 100 times in my career, oh yeah, we just need to go slide a pizza under the door, so that those techie engineers can just keep working. Don't talk to them, just slide a pizza under the door, right? That's not a particularly like, because I love them, because they're so amazing. It's like, I don't understand them, I don't want to interact them, and I interact with them, and I know they don't want to interact with me, so I'm going to literally slide a pizza under the door. Like, that's crazy. But you said hyperfocus. Hyperfocus sounds really cool. That sounds like, what is that? What is hyperfocus? And I have started to use that term, not trying to appropriate something, right? And there's all this cultural appropriation and misappropriation kinds of conversations, but that's a pretty generic term that we use more, that autistic individuals use more, that is something I have started to do myself, and I call it hyperfocus. I'm like, yeah, I need some hyperfocus time, right, on this particular project, and normalizing that a little bit. If I say, oh, I'm hyper-focusing right now, I'm sorry I didn't see your Slack message because I was hyper-focused, right? I was like, those are the little things that we can do that give permission for everybody to respect hyper-focus. And it's not going into a cave, and it's not sliding a pizza under the door. It's a really productive time. And now you might need an hour of hyper-focus time, and I might only need 20 minutes of hyper-focus, but it doesn't matter, right? We place value on doing the things that are going to work the best for your brain, for my brain. Some of those, we have some shared language around, and the exact implementation is a little bit different. Those are examples of things that we can do that help individuals just feel more comfortable supporting themselves and doing the things that they need to be more effective. And it will positively impact the entire organization, not just the individual.
How do you navigate the social connection side of things? Because I think that that's pretty necessary in any company, like for them to have some kind of connection. And that's also, for even just team members who aren't, neurodivergent to at least feel supported, because that's the way that they communicate. That's what they need out of this relationship, to feel trusting and connected to a person, right? So how do you navigate that when you're placing people? Like, what are the expectations that you set? And like, one-on-one's a lot easier. Like, I love one-on-one conversations versus like group situations, right? And introverts would argue that that's how they are, whether you're neurodivergent or not. Maybe every introvert's neurodivergent, I don't know, right? But it's not just with autism, right? It's like kind of across the board. So, but how do you navigate that? And I think that this is really an important thing. So I just want to dig a little bit deeper, because I do think it's this and communication in general, which we can get to next, I think is just such a friction point that if we could just educate companies a little bit more, or even just like have an idea of how to navigate it and accept it, both sides of it, I think it would like go leaps and bounds for relationships within companies.
Yeah, so diversity of, we're talking about diversity here, neurodiversity, and so giving people diverse ways to interact is really, really powerful. Individual settings and group settings, online settings, in-person settings. So we try and offer a bunch of different options for people, and we encourage our clients to do the same. Slack, right? We have plenty of one-on-one, Slack interactions, and then we have some bigger channels, and then we have some smaller channels, and some of the smaller channels, like one of them is just the random channel, right? And people drop really random things into the random channel, and when people see something they like, then there's a thread, right? Or maybe even a new channel that emerges, and it's important for people to feel like they've got a place where I can say anything I want, right, within reason. Let's not, get super violent or angry about it. But having a diverse set of options for people to interact, and then diverse ways to communicate. Another thing that we do is when we have like a group session, like a company meeting, we try and really respect the time that we put on the calendar for people, and not pop it on, to surprise anyone with it. So it's on the calendar weeks, if not months in advance. We have an agenda that we follow that's pretty consistent, and then we'll get on and present information verbally and visually. And then afterwards, we send a written summary of the meeting as well that's got lots of bullets, so it's easy to see, to kind of parse through that information and process it. And that's super powerful. Some people are just really connecting to what someone is saying, on the call, and other people have a hard time with that, and they just know they're going to get a written summary afterwards, and it's okay, they're not stressed out. Other people are taking notes, they're all processing that information differently, and we're presenting it in a variety of ways, in multiple ways, right? Audio, visual, written, pictures, and so it makes we're maximizing the opportunities for people to be able to fully understand that. So to meet diversity with diversity, right? If we know there's a diverse group of people, that some want social interactions and some don't. Some want to be online, some want to be in person, some want it to be happy and fun, some want it to be super serious, some want it written, some want it, they just communicate that way. And you're gonna maximize the comprehension of the information, you're gonna maximize the engagement of all of those people, their satisfaction. So that's what I would say is meet diversity with diversity. And it doesn't mean that you have to go do crazy things, right? What I just said, those are like audio, visual, like written, in advance, those are all pretty like good things to do, whether you're neurodivergent or neurotypical. In person, online, on camera, off, like those are not super difficult.
I love it. So I want to dive a little bit more into communication, which is the honesty, the double-edged sword that comes with it. And I think that I have talked about this in my previous interviews, which is, I have literally taken every communication course, read every communication book that is out there. It's something that I'm constantly focusing on. I've done revenue ops for the last 13 years. Like that's the basis of what I've done. And then I've layered on like VP of sales and CRO and things like that. But this time around, I'm just looking for revenue operations. And whenever I go into these interviews, it's a large part of it is because in revenue operations, you have to be brutally honest. If you're not brutally honest, if you leave any type of room for like assumptions, interpretation, it can cost the company a lot of money. And so I'm actively, now focusing on positions that are like aligned with how I communicate versus like trying to work within positions and say like, hey, this is how I communicate, like how can we make this work, right? And so it really comes down to the double-edged sword. Ogie and I, the neuroscientists, we had a big conversation about this as well. But I don't know how to view the world, and it's why I love data, qualitative, quantitative, experience-based data, right? There is no misinterpretation with the data. You can have a bunch of, solutions and paths, right? But like the data is going to show what it really is, right? And so I think that that's just kind of why I gravitate towards that. But it's off-putting, right? Like it's off-putting to go into a meeting and say, hey, this person, built out this, marketing campaign and they put so much into this, even though we had, weekly meetings to kind of try to tweak it and, adjust. It was their baby. And then at the end of it, I have to say, hey, this isn't working, right? We're not getting enough ROI. It's costing us money. There's no long-term, success for this. And they're crushed and they feel like it's like a personal attack. And I'm using the position, but like it's also with like, speaking to a sales rep and being like, hey, these are the areas of improvement that we need to see within your calls, within your metrics, et cetera, right? There's respectful communication, right? Constructive communication. It's not like, hey, why did you do this? Accusational, right? Versus constructive. But it's still very off-putting to people. And I do not understand why. Like I personally want to be communicated with very directly. And I know I've learned over the last 10 years that it's not, it's not what people really want. It's not what they really want at the beginning. But at the end, when they're successful, I always get a thank you. But without fail, it's always hard in that beginning parts. And then at the end of it, it's like we're best friends and they, love the outcome and this, and that, right? But it is a really, really big friction point. And I know it's the double-edged sword. So how do you navigate that? What advice do you have to both the company and the individual?
Yeah. So, first of all, I do think, positioning it as, directness, honesty, transparency, those are ways that we can celebrate it, right? Not criticize the diversity. I do think that practicing the delivery of that kind of direct and honest information, especially when you know things like, I also have data that says we've spent 6 weeks building this program, and I know for a fact this person is spending the majority of their time working on it, and the data says it's not successful. Those are two different data points, right?
Yeah.
We're doing lots of activity and not getting the results that we need. That's data on both sides. So if I just come in with a hammer on the one half of the equation and say, well, you're wrong, you wasted your time.
Right.
I'm not really valuing that whole data set completely. And so if I can just, think to myself before I just look at the data that I'm seeing that is directly impacting company profitability or expenditure of resources or whatever, and I also think about the investment that the company made, then I can say, okay, so what's the best way to present this? What's going to be the most effective way to present this? And when you can say, and I'm dealing with somebody, you know, I know my brain is like this, right? I see things really black and white, and I know their brain is different, and they see things, you know, as lots of colors on a spectrum. So I want to try and, you know, adjust a little bit to meet them where their brain is at, just like I want them to adjust to meet me where my brain is at. And so if we can get people to pause for a little bit, it's going to be uncomfortable for everybody.
Right.
I talked about embracing the discomfort earlier. The journey to neuro-inclusion is not like this fun little ride through the park, you know. It's got some ups and some downs. And so, but getting everybody to think about the way our brains work and not just say it's my way or the highway, right? I value the neurodivergent brain hopefully values the neurotypical brain, and we can, you know, work together. The job coach is a huge part of this equation, especially in the early phases of the journey. And the job coach for the neurodivergent person as well as for the neurotypical person. And before you know, and a lot of times we say, so before you go have that tough conversation where you're going to present the data, just talk to your job coach about it and kind of role play it, go through it a little bit with them. And they'll probably say, okay, now remember, Megan, you're talking to so-and-so, and they've got this colorful, maybe rose-colored view of the world and their data, but they do have data, and you just have some black and white data that looks a little bit different. So how about asking them a question first, you know, and ask them these 3 questions? How about sending them your data in advance and allowing them some time to process it before you just hit them over the head with it in the team meeting? Right? Send it. You know, there's lots of tactics, right, that we can use to try and, you know, not hide the data, right? We don't want to hide this data, but we just also are going to respect the fact that their brain is a little bit different, and the way that they're going to process and receive this information is a little bit different. And so here's a few suggestions and a few ideas, and it's going to be uncomfortable. You're going to be like chomping at the bit to say, but it's wrong, you know, but we need to stop now. We're wasting valuable money. And that's okay. You know, that's okay. The company invested this time and this money in this program and this person, and another day or 2 or a week is not, you know, hopefully we're not going to go out of business, right? You know, they have other problems if that's the case. So getting everyone to embrace the discomfort, to recognize that it's going to be there, and to then value each other's brains and the way they would process and receive information, and to then recognize that at the end of this journey, we're going to be in a much happier, better place where we're all more productive, where we're all more engaged, and we value and appreciate each other even more. Like, that's important. But it's going to take a few tough conversations. And again, a job coach is oftentimes a really great way to come in and, you know, even if you don't engage them at the beginning, right? When you get super frustrated and you call your job coach and say, Reshma, I just presented the data and everybody, you know, like, they left the call. Like, they got off the call. They were so mad. And they sent me this angry email, and I am, you know, like, Reshma will talk you through that. And Reshma will probably say, let me reach out to that other person. I'll have a conversation. You know, that's just one of the ways that we engage with our clients, and you know, and we talk to them up front, you know, about this journey when we can. Sometimes we're coming in when it's already the heat of battle, and they're like, we're having a real problem with this one person who is, I don't know, they're probably autistic, you know, and we need help to understand them. And we're like, okay, we can help. And so sometimes we, you know, we want to avoid a lawsuit, you know. I'm like, okay.
Yeah, that's how it goes.
You know, so we can work with that too, right?
Yeah.
but it's going to be, there's going to be some discomfort, and if people will just embrace it a little bit, and also be open to diverse ways of thinking and valuing each other's brains, it ends up being super powerful, super productive.
So I always like to highlight, there's this, Amy Schumer has this show, it's called Life of Beth on Hulu. And her husband is actually autistic. They found out when she was older. Whether you're a fan of Amy Schumer, it's kind of, beside the point. There's this moment, there's this moment in the show, and it was the point that I understood. I haven't understood how I was different before. Like I could not tell you. I was like, I don't know why these people felt this conversation was uncomfortable, right? But there's this moment where her and her husband in this show, they're sitting at a table, like this 18-year-old walks in, it's like their neighbor, and he's like grabbing something, and he says, "Hey, we're going to play pickleball. Do you want to come play with us?" Right? And he's really excited about it. And the autistic husband goes, "No, Amy and I think that pickleball is stupid. We don't like it." And he walks out. The kid obviously seems deflated. But he walks out. The wife, Amy Schumer, yells at him, "Why would you be mean like that? Blah, 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 blah. There was, just tell him that we are busy. We can't do anything." And he was like, "I think it's rude that you're lying to him." And so while I would not have communicated that, because I think that it's important to respect, I luckily have like a high emotional intelligence, and I've worked really, really hard at it. It's important to respect everybody, and I definitely wouldn't say something negative about something that I haven't even tried, right? But what I wanted to point out is there's a values thing there. So as an autistic individual and other autistic individuals that I've spoken to, and I don't like to speak in absolutes, this is just my experience and interactions. For me, honesty is the number one way that I can show respect to you. Like, I care enough about you in this situation to tell you what is happening. It's not easy for me. Like, I don't want to see you crushed in front of me, like I don't want to see you cry. I don't want to it's just as hard for me. It's not something I take joy out of, but I care about you and I respect you so much that I'm willing to have these difficult conversations. And so I think that it's just important to understand that it's not even just that it's black and white. It's not that the data is just black and white, right? Like, I actually would argue that I don't just see in black and white. Data is black and white, I think, in that instance, but within each data point tells a different story that it can be. And because of that, I'm very flexible. I'm very adaptable to where we want to go, right? And the opportunities that we have. But ultimately, I want to be honest and upfront with you about the situation at hand and all of those moving parts, right? And so I think too, if neurotypical individuals could understand that it's actually how we show respect. We care that much. I care that much about you that I'm willing to be that uncomfortable, right? I think that would be also, I try to emphasize that to people throughout the years, right? I care this much about you. That's why I'm telling you that you're fucking up. You haven't showed up to work in 3 days. This isn't good. This isn't going somewhere good, right? And instead of just firing you or closing off, and assuming something, I'm never going to do that. I'm never going to make that assumption. I'm always going to have that difficult situation with you, right? And see what we can do. And so I think understanding, I see that as a strength. I've always seen that as a strength of my own, and why I handle such difficult projects and I actually handle really difficult people very well is because I'm curious, because I want to have that conversation, right? And I want to be honest with you and I want you to be honest with me, and that's always how you get to a solution, right? So I just want to highlight that, because I think that it's such a misconception between the two. It's not to be mean. It's not that we see things in black and white. It's just because we care that much that we're willing to be uncomfortable.
Yeah. Well, I think the way you talked about it is super powerful too, Megan. And it was very personal. It was not, well, you're stupid, you're slow, it's, first of all, I care a lot. And second of all, it's hard for me to see things and not share them. And this is what I see. The data is telling me this. That's different than saying, you missed the data, you're wrong, you're stupid, you know, like personalizing it like you did, and even giving a little bit of a preface that is not self-deprecating. It's not, everybody tells me I'm really blunt and rude, but now I'm going to tell you something really blunt. You know, you're setting yourself up, as opposed to saying, you know what, little nephew, I can't remember who the kid was, you know, like, you know, like, I care a lot about you and about our relationship, and I have some experience and some information about pickleball that tells me it is actually, you know, I don't know the data. I'm over, you know, I should use that analogy, but I like that example. And if it was a little bit more personalized, right? Like, I don't like pickleball.
Right.
I feel like pickleball, you know, X, Y, and Z. I prefer tennis, and here's why. And I would be happy to share with you more about why I feel this way. But and Amy, you know, values the relationship so much that she's probably not going to tell you the way that she actually feels. But I've had a conversation with her, and I think she agrees with me. But you should ask her, you know, what she really, you know, feels. But I don't like pickleball, and I'd be happy to tell you more about why I don't like pickleball. And it's also different than saying pickleball is stupid.
Yeah,
You know?
it is.
So I don't like pickleball. I feel like pickleball doesn't give you the same cardio workout, is not blah blah. Again, I don't know enough about pickleball myself, but there are ways, you know, to still present the information, make it personal enough that, and then own it in a non-self-deprecating way. I've seen too many people deprecate themselves, right, and say, well, you know, everybody tells me I'm blunt and rude, you know, so, you know, kind of like, and you know, setting themselves up to then be criticized, and we want to celebrate the differences, right?
Yeah.
We want to say, you know, if everybody on the planet just loved pickleball, I don't know if that would be that exciting, because nobody else would play tennis or racquetball or any of these other
Yeah.
that sounds more boring. We want pickleball and tennis and racquetball and badminton and, you know, all these other sports I've never even heard of. That makes the world a beautiful place. It doesn't mean I need to play pickleball. I don't play pickleball.
I love it. My boyfriend's obsessed with pickleball, so that's all I ever hear about. But so I know that we're kind of running out of time, but I just wanted to say there's a couple more things that I wanted to go over. There's this thought that I've been sharing, which is I read Super Communicators. It's a book. It came out in the last year. And I'm always looking to understand, like, just how my mind works. I'm always looking for every type of content, you know, data point, whatever it may be. And this book, I think that I've learned to communicate and connect with neurodivergents, especially autistic individuals, in the sense of their values. And I know that that's where my friction comes with others. Like, I'm very easygoing. There's not a lot that upsets me, but my value system is what will upset me. How you treat people, how you communicate with people, right? What work and effort you put into something that you've committed to. And kindness is something that is really high in my value list, right? And there's this, you know, you can volunteer, you can do this, you can do that. But this book, and it wasn't meant to be this way. It really is based around science on how to be a super communicator and connect with people, right? But this book, like, really just hit home on what kindness was for me. And it's as simple as, like, listening to the other person, like wanting to understand and wanting to listen to them and really hearing them, not just sitting there, like, going through your brain, trying to think of the next, conversation, the next question. And I've practiced this and I've implemented it, and I've kind of seen it throughout the years, right? You know this, I guess, to a certain degree, right? But I've found a way to connect with individuals, neurotypicals and neurodivergents, with just that. Like, it's just such a strong tool in my toolbox right now. It doesn't matter the differences that you have, the communication issues that you have. If you can just sit and listen to the other person, your relationship's going to be okay. You're going to build something there.
I agree. Amen. 100%.
So I know we already ran out of time. I do want to know what is the biggest obstacle that you have placing people, and then what is like something a result that has been so amazing that you'd like to share with us?
Oh, just like legal procurement, getting through all the, you get into bigger companies, right? It's like, okay, well, now we need the rate cards, and now we need to determine, it's just the bureaucracy, the administrivia is,
Yeah.
it's important, right? I have a background in supply chain and I've, it's an important process, but it's so hard when you're talking to a team and they're like, okay, let's go, right? And then it's like, but wait, we got to go, dot all these I's and cross all these T's. So that can be frustrating. It can be frustrating when, I'm going to mention a kind of a second thing, just knowing the discomfort is coming.
Okay.
Like, I know there's going to be some uncomfortable thing that will happen, and not knowing exactly when it's going to happen or what it will be, but just knowing it is, it's kind of inevitable, but not knowing when it's going to come and how the client is going to respond, that can be challenging and frustrating. And then when it does happen, to have them be like, this is it, this is horrible. You'll never guess what your autistic teammate just did. And I'll say, like, try me, and we work through it, right? We work through it, but just knowing that can be challenging and frustrating. Successes, oh my gosh, we just had someone from our team get nominated as Employee of the Month in their division, and this was a big company, and this person had been working with this team for months, but not years, and
Right.
they were recognized and nominated as Employee of the Month in this massive, organization, and it was like this proud kind of parent moment. I was just like, that's awesome. That's our person. They are being recognized not because they're autistic, but because they are doing amazing work. And OPS, everybody knows they're from Auticon as well, and that they're autistic. But that's not the point. The point is they're doing amazing work, and they've been recognized by this massive organization. And that was so rewarding.
That's beautiful. I love it. To kind of close up, what do you hope the future holds for neurodiverse individuals in the tech industry?
Well, my hope is that everybody has a job that is equal to their intellectual abilities and social abilities and all of their abilities, right? They deserve a chance, and they deserve a job that's going to pay the bills and provide them a career that sustains them and their loved ones. That's my hope, and that's my future, that we will end or dramatically reduce the unemployment and the underemployment of these brilliant people.
I love that. And so I hope that we can get, a lot more support for that as well. So thank you for doing the work that you do.
Likewise, Megan, it's been a pleasure.
Thanks.